العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين بالقاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد ثم الصلاة والسلام التحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the last session, we started off by asking, out of all the different topics and subject matters that we can discuss, how are we supposed to pick, whether someone's a speaker, a lecturer, someone is just trying to do more Islamic research, someone's trying to improve themselves spiritually. What sort of topics should we begin with? How do we start off? And we said that there's a lot of different ways of going about it, but if we're talking about the most practical, the most needed, the most wajib, the only one which is a daily practice, a daily necessity for all of us, and the one that's been emphasized in the Quran more than anything else is salah. And as we saw in the riwayat last time as well, that in the riwayat of the Ahlul Bayt, alayhimus salam, they say that if your salah is accepted, then everything else will get accepted as well too. But if your salah is rejected, then everything else is going to be rejected. And we said the idea is that it's not that salah is like a cheat. It's not just automatically making everything approved. It's perhaps showing us a state of mind or a state of behavior that slowly transforms a person. Once they begin taking on that true discipline of real salah, then by extension, naturally, as a consequence, their life transforms. So then, of course, everything else would be accepted. You won't find somebody typically that would devote themselves, have that hudurul qalb, that presence of heart in their salah, but then be negligent about other duties. That usually is not the case. There are exceptions, but usually it's not the case. You find the other way though, somebody might have good akhlaq, but maybe they may not pray as much. Somebody might care about the month of Ramadan, if you remember our discussions then. They might fast then, but maybe just normally they don't pray salah. So it doesn't work the other way, but typically when someone is strict and careful and attentive to their salah, it typically extends to the other parts of their physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual life. So we decided that because of the final words of many of the Anbiya and Mursaleen, including Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, as Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, where he's, as many other prophets were reported to have said on their deathbed, as-salah, 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 right? Reminding us many times that this is something that we have to pay attention to. He said, okay, so instead of just kind of taking a cursory glance at the topic of salah, whether it's from the ahkam, legal side of it, whether it's from the actual spiritual side, there's some other aspects that hopefully we can spend a bit more time, since we're not, constrained by anything, right? We're not constrained by the 10 nights of Muharram or 30 nights in Ramadan, right? This, inshallah, if Allah gives us tawfiq, can be ongoing, so we don't have to, rush to any of these topics, right? So we can spend time, if inshallah, we can, Allah gives us the tawfiq. So typically, we would think, okay, let's jump right into it. We want to talk about salah. Let's start talking about some of the deeper wisdoms, the hikmah, the basira, what's going on here. So one of the first questions, a natural, logical first question for anybody would be, okay, well, why salah? Right? Every single ibadah, there's a why question to it. Right? We asked the why question about hijab, and many of our ulama have given answers. There's answers in the riwayat. I'm sure many of you have heard it before. When we have questions about the Islamic financial system, social welfare, etc., right? There's whys to that as well. And right, for inheritance, for khum, zakat, all of this, right? So they have answers as well too. So of course, like anything else in Islam, people naturally ask, okay, why? Why do we have to offer this salah? And then they get into the specifics, right? Not just the salah as a whole, but every single part of it. Okay, why a wudu, then why a niyyah, then why the adhan, and in the adhan, why this thing 4 times, and then this many times, and this, and then the iqamah, you change the amount of times, except for these ones don't change, but this one does change. And then you get into the salah, you have a takbir in the beginning. Why is it arranged like this? Right? Now, there's an easy answer to all of this, which is the same answer that anybody can give to anything in Islam. When you ask a why question about why salah, why this, why this. It's the easiest answer. It's true, but it's an easy answer, which is what? Allah said so, right? It's that simple. He said so. Now, it's true. It's correct. It's technically one of the highest level answers. It may not seem like it, but it is the highest level answer you can give. If Allah decreed it and ordered it this way, then that should be enough. But Allah didn't forbid curiosity. He didn't forbid investigation and inquiry. In fact, it's recommended. Tahqiq, looking for deeper realities, looking for deeper ma'rifah is what we're supposed to be doing. Okay? So, okay. Yes, Allah, I know that you made it, and I know you had a purpose behind it. And technically, if my salah is weakened because I don't know, fine, that's a personal problem. You know, sometimes we get into this habit, especially younger people, especially those when they're first starting out trying to get in the habit of praying, or their parents are trying to get them in the habit of praying, right? Oh, why do I have to do this? What's the point? And when sometimes certain personality types, especially younger ones, when we don't have the reason for something, we don't know the purpose of it, the hadaf, the maqsad, the hikmah, the wisdom behind it, usually that takes away from some of that willpower and adds to the laziness, right? I'm much less likely to perform an action if I don't know. And there's a whole discussion about why that's the case, right? Shortened version of it is there is a difference, generally speaking, about Western personality types and approaches to life and religion versus East, right? In the East, in general, and not just the Muslim civilizational world, but I'm saying just the Eastern mentalities in general, it's much more sami'na wa ata'na. We hear, we obey. That's it. Whether you're God, whether you're a parent, whether you're a king or a queen, whether you're a soldier, whether you're my boss, no confrontation, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And usually that authoritarian style will also make a person afraid of even asking the question in the first place. This is what the authority says, don't question it. Sometimes you'd say, you know, when we ask questions to our parents or grandparents or scholars of that generation or that cultural background, why do they get so upset? Why are they so like, why are you asking questions? Well, it's kind of a cultural thing, unfortunately, that's developed. It's not part of the Islamic culture. It's an outside culture that developed. There's a whole reason for it, which, you know, it's not our subject, but it's something that we have to keep in the back of our mind. Those of us who may incline towards that, who feel it's an affront to me. Somebody's asking me why. Why is my child asking me why? Just do it because I'm your parent. Well, there's many reasons why, and again, it's beneficial that they do that. Yes, in an ideal world, they would also manifest the same quality of sami'na wa ata'na, that they hear and obey Allah, they hear and obey their parents, assuming their parents are telling them what is good for them, obviously, or anybody that is ordering them towards something that's beneficial for them. That'd be great. But that's not the standard operating procedure in the West. So we have to slowly start to adjust. And what that helps us to do, those of us who maybe, again, we're born with more of an Eastern kind of, call it blind faith, although I don't want to mean it in a negative sense, because yes, our Urafa do say that there is a benefit to blind faith as well. And maybe another discussion, another time we can talk about that. But the point is that we sometimes have to see these opportunities that have been presented to us. That Allah is saying, okay, I gave you this amana, right, in this child. Their personality type, their culture is different. They're going to approach things differently than the way that you were. Recognize that the way that they are approaching it is more Islamic. If they're asking questions, if they're interested, that is a good thing. So we can't be pushing back. Yes, technically speaking, at a deeper level, the highest level someone could get to is that, no, I don't need the reason, I just want to do it because Allah said so. But Allah understands that, look, many of you, that's not your journey yet. Inshallah, maybe one day we'll get to a place like that where any ruling, any command that comes from Allah or any of His awliya, I'll follow it. But many of us, again, whether young or old, East or West, we still do have a little bit, a part of us that says, no, I need to have some reasoning there too. What's interesting though, is that there are some people who are, I'd say, extra stubborn about it. That not just if they don't know the meaning of salah or other things that they won't do it, right? Or they'll be a little bit lazy in it. They just completely abandon it altogether, right? So for salah, they'll say, look, until I find out the meaning of every single word, until I get the complete understanding of this, I'm not going to pray at all. Or typically the same style of thinking is used for hijab, right? Generally speaking. We hear a lot of young sisters who say, look, unless my heart is in it, unless I completely understand the purpose for it, I'm not going to do it, right? Which to some degree we can appreciate, although again, it's a problematic way to approach things. It doesn't matter whether it's hijab, salah, reading the Quran, any sort of ibadah. For somebody to completely abandon something because they don't understand it. Okay, now why is that an issue? Well, sometimes, let me recite this after salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Because sometimes when we call that out as an issue, that no, just do it, the understanding can come alongside. You don't have to say either this or that. Say, look, start hijab, start reading the Quran, start praying, do all this stuff, and then alongside with it, you can learn and research and read and do it. You don't have to toss it away. Then they push back. They say, no, I want to know everything. I said, hold on a second. If you're going to take this approach, a good question to ask is, do I use this exact same mentality and approach for everything else in my life? Or am I showing a little bit of religious nifaq? What do I mean? That way is, right, my way or the highway, either all or nothing, that either I understand the way that satisfies me or I'm not going to do it altogether, right? That's a very extreme way of doing it. Is that same sort of way, that same mentality and approach, do we use that in other parts of our life too? When somebody, and I used this example on somebody that I knew a long time ago, because they had the same thing. They called me and they said, Hassan, I just don't feel like praying. I don't understand, so I'm stopping. I said, okay, fine. And so we got into a conversation, opened it up a little bit, and I asked them, I said, look, when you get a headache, right, and you have some pain in your body, what do you do? I was like, take pain medication, right? Tylenol, Advil, or any of the knockoffs, right? What is it called? NSAIDs, right? Something like that, right? He's like, that's what I take, right, to deal with the pain. Like, okay. So I said, look, you take those every time. He's like, yeah. I'm like, do they always work? Like, no, not all the time. Like, sometimes I take them and they work. Sometimes the pain gets worse. Sometimes it stays the same, right? Like, okay. I said, do you know how these NSAIDs, right, what non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, right? That's what it stands for, I think, right? Yeah. Right. Do you know how this works? What exactly is happening in your body when you take that pill or that capsule or that liquid, whatever? Do you know what's going on inside? No, I have no idea. Okay, why do you keep taking it then? Why don't you go and read some medical papers about it and then start taking it? It's like, well, no, I'm not going to do that. Why not? It's like, well, because it helps. Like, you just told me it doesn't help all the time, though. It helps sometimes. It's like, yeah, that's true. I'm like, okay, so it helps sometimes, but not all the time. So it's not the result that's making you do it. Like, you have a hope for the result, but sometimes it doesn't work. I said, why are you trusting it? He's like, well, doctors and all these companies, and there's research behind it, and that's where it comes from, so I'm trusting all of that. I'm like, okay, so sometimes you've gotten results from it, and you know that there's research that has backed all this stuff up, and you're trusting all of that. You have no idea what that research is. You've never read anything. You've never asked anybody. You're just going by blind faith. I said, how come you're applying this blind faith mentality to this, but not to anything in religion, especially your salah? Why? That's what we mean by this kind of hypocritical approach that sometimes we take, right? In one part of life, when it comes to the dunya, I'll do one thing. I'll trust people. I'll trust companies and CEOs, or what were they saying during COVID? Trust the science, right? I'll do all of that, right? Which is fine. When it comes to religion, well, the Quran, I don't know if I fully trust it. Allah, I don't know if I fully trust him. The Marajir, I don't know if I fully trust them. Ulama, the doubts start coming in much, much more easily. I said, okay, if centuries upon centuries, 1,400 years of research and information has been passed down, I said, yeah, there might be some things that various people disagree on, but praying to God is something that every single religion pretty much has in common, that you have to call out to a higher power. And I said, and between Sunni and Shia, we pretty much have almost the exact same salah in terms of the formation. Some of the words here and there are a bit different and some little ahkam differences, but it's the same thing. All the scholars, there's not one single scholar that exists among the Muslims who said you don't have to pray. I said, so all of this is there, and it's been tried and tested, and people who know what they're doing, they pray and they get that tranquility. They stay away from indecency. So the results are there too. I said, so why aren't you applying this approach? Right? That it's been proven, that people have researched it, it's been passed down. You're doing it for medical stuff, or financial stuff, or work, or anything else, but you're not doing it for this. And sometimes when we see that, maybe I've been playing games with myself. I've been playing these psychological games. Sometimes that can help us rewire and reorient ourselves at saying that, you know what? Maybe I need to have a bit more actual faith in this religion that I'm trying to practice and follow. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now remember, we're not saying don't ask questions. We're not saying don't research. We're saying, yes, you do that. If you have the capacity, you have resources, and alhamdulillah, there's many resources available, right, in the quote-unquote modern world. So research, ask the questions. If you don't get an answer that satisfies you, no problem, keep looking. Right? That's what we want for people to do. Okay, now let's go back to this. We're trying to figure out, okay, why the salah? What's the purpose? What's the reason? What's the wisdom behind it? Well, I can do you one better. We can say also, okay, well, if we can ask the why question about salah, why not ask it about anything else too, just like we do? Right? I can ask it about why hijab and why khums and why zakat and why hajj and why XYZ, all the ibadat. Why on these nights of Qadr we recite like this, or why does the Quran have to be like this? We can ask the why questions for any of the acts of worship we do, right? Okay. So maybe a bigger question then is why any of the ibadat in the first place? Why are we worshiping? What is all this action that's required of us? Certain things we have to do, certain things we should not be doing. Certain things it's better if we do, certain things it's better if we don't do, because it's detrimental to our spiritual growth. But why all of this stuff? What's the purpose behind all of that? And then you go even one step deeper, or you could say one step higher. Well, okay, Allah, did you just make me to do all of these things? Is that what I'm here for? You threw me and tossed me into this dunya, this world, just so I can do a bunch of do's and not do these don'ts? Right? Do this, don't do that. That's what I'm here for? And some people, when they look at and they talk about this question of why were we created, that's the kind of answer that they feel Allah is giving when they look at some of the ayat. For example, the most famous one, if we were to ask in the Quran, does Allah answer the question of why were we created? Yeah, He answers it many times. But depending on where you look, the answer might seem a bit different. What are some examples that you can think of where in the Quran the question of why were we created has been answered? Which ayah? Do you know where the ayah or no? Ahsan. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is Surah Dhariyat, Surah 51, Ayah 56. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Right? Very famous ayah. So, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ, it starts with a negation. I didn't create you, Allah is saying. I didn't create jinn and humans, except, in other words, saying that this is the only reason I'm creating jinn and humans for what? إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. So that you worship. So the whole purpose, the whole reason we are made, we've been created and put here on this earth with soul, body, mind, all this stuff is what? Just for ibadah and worship. That's what Allah is saying here. So, okay. So, I guess it's nothing deeper than that then. Allah is saying, I made you and you just got to do these actions. That's it. Seems kind of, is that it? Like that's the big question? Imagine that you and I were talking to somebody else about Islam. They said, okay, so you're in your religion. What does God tell you about the reason for why you were made? I said, oh, God tells us. He tells us in the book, in the Quran. He says that I made you to worship. And nowadays people want these deep, super spiritual answers, philosophical, metaphysical. Like, oh, so you're saying that in Islam, God said, I made you to do a bunch of stuff. That's it. Like, yeah. Kind of feels like there's something missing, right? Well, yeah. In the riwayat, in many of the riwayat, it's explained a bit deeper. Like, okay, this ibadah, what is going on with this ibadah? And in some of the riwayat, it says that this liya'budun, the reason for ibadah, or what does ibadah mean over here, is liya'rifun, to gain ma'rifah. This reason for creation of both jinn and insan. We'll leave the jinn part out because we don't care about them. I mean, I'm not saying we don't care about the jinn, right? But they got their own things, we have our own things, so we'll leave them to their world. We care about our creation and our purpose. So in this hadith, the explanation, the deeper tafsir that's given is that the only reason Allah made us is for ma'rifah. There's another piece of the puzzle that's important to note too. So if we just read normally the way that we recite and do qira'ah of the Quran, right? وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Technically, there is a vowel, a haraka, at the end of this, right? لِيَعْبُدُونَ, there should be something there at the end of it, right? It's either لِيَعْبُدُونَا, لِيَعْبُدُونُ, لِيَعْبُدُونِي, has to have something. We all know that when you're reciting, this is just a general Arabic rule, when you make waqf, when you stop, you cut off that last sound, right? Wherever you stop, right? In your sentence, right? Right? Spoken Arabic nowadays is different, but in classical Fusha, this is the way it's supposed to be done, especially when it's with the Quran. So even if you're mid-ayah, right? When you see these qadis, these qurra reciting, if they pause mid-ayah, in the middle of an ayah somewhere, they don't recite that end sound, right? They'll go back and then they continue on like that. I'm sure you've heard it before. Okay. So if we were just to kind of gloss through this, and even if I knew Arabic, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. And Allah saying, I did not create jinn and insan and humans except for worship, or except for ma'rifah, right? To know Allah. Now, at the end of this, normally in Arabic, ya'budun being a present tense noun, it should be ya'buduna. That would be normal. In this ayah, it's actually the ya'buduni. There's a kasra at the end. I'm like, okay, who cares? Like, what does that matter? It matters because there are certain times in the Quran that when this happens, when a kasra is like that at the end of a word, it means that something else was cut off afterwards. It should be ya'buduna, it's not. It's ya'budun with a kasra, and then afterwards would be a ya. And that ya has been hadf, has been cut away. It's in taqdeer, as we say, it's hidden. So what is it really saying is Allah saying, I did not create jinn and humans except to worship me. Or I did not create jinn and humans except to have ma'rifah of me. That me, that ya, right? Whenever we see ya in Arabic at the end of a word, means mine, right? Kitab, kitabi. Book, my book, right? Like that. Why would Allah leave something like that out? Like that's pretty important, Allah, to leave literally yourself out of an important ayah like this. There's many different theories. I'll let you kind of do your own thinking and tafakkur about it. But perhaps, as some ulama suggest, perhaps the secret of this ayah is found within the same secret of this thing being in taqdeer, being hidden. And Allah saying that I created you to gain ma'rifah, and then hidden, unless you are paying attention, you won't know ma'rifah of me. Perhaps, at least one of the secrets is that this gaining ma'rifah of Allah is not something that's supposed to be obvious to everybody. This is not just gaining knowledge, going online and looking something up, asking AI, all of that stuff. No. But saying, look, even myself, I'm putting hidden in this ayah so that those who actually are going to pay attention and read and look for these clues that I put all throughout in the Quran, in the universe, they're actually going to go and find these things. When they go and find that, then they'll get a better result than everybody else. They'll gain more ma'rifah from it. So perhaps that secret piece has been put in the Quran for us to try to unlock, inshaAllah ta'ala. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, okay, the answer was, why are we created? We're created for ibadah. So we got to go deeper than that. Okay, we went deeper. The purpose is to have ma'rifah of Allah. Okay, and then Allah saying ma'rifah of me there. Okay, that sounds deep too, but still, if you and I are asked about what is ma'rifah and ma'rifah of Allah, what answer are we going to give there? For ourselves, not for anybody else. What does it mean to have ma'rifah of Allah? Allah saying the only reason I made you is to gain ma'rifah of me. You can translate it as deep recognition, deep knowledge, cognizance, all these fancy words. That doesn't really tell you the difference between ilm and ma'rifah. There's something else over here that we have to try to figure out. And I'll give you some clues as we end, inshallah, in a few minutes and prepare for salah. Just things to think about for next time. There's only a few different ways we could explain something like this, right? When some people think about the question of salah, of the why ibadah, all of these things, some mistakenly answer, say, well, that's just because what Allah needs from us, right? Allah needs us to do all of this stuff. Now, any of us who have taken at least even 1 month of Sunday school, right, basic madrasa, God doesn't have any need. Na'udhu billah. It's not like God says, I need you to pray to me. He doesn't need that. All powerful, all knowledgeable, all wise. He doesn't need us to do anything. Whether we pray or not doesn't affect Allah at all. Whether we do any wajibat, whether we have any iman or not, it has zero effect on Allah. So no, it's not about Allah I need you guys to pray to me and worship me. Humans have needs like that, unfortunately. They need attention, they need to fulfill their ego, right? Which we have to fight against. Allah doesn't have a need like that. So we can't say that Allah needs it. But we can say that we do. We can say, and we should be saying, okay, there's got to be some need that I have for this salah. How do I figure out what that need is? It has to be connected to this idea of ma'rifah somehow, right? Okay, so we have to try to connect these puzzle pieces. There's something going on deeper over here, right? When we're talking about this reason for creation, right? Trying to get to this ma'rifah. When we talk about why something was created, there's two different ways that we can answer that question. Right? When you ask a why question, why did something happen? Why did something get created? There's two ways we can approach it, right? Let me give an example. So, one topic that's still pretty famous right now is Islamic schooling, right? Or schooling. People still come and ask me, should I send my kids to public school? Should I send them to an Islamic school? Should I do private, homeschooling? Right? These are the three typical options that exist right now, and people are asking it all over North America, right? And even Europe as well too. And there's many different kind of answers to give based on people's preferences, their circumstances. So if you ask a certain parents, okay, why did you make your choice, right? You ask the typical public school parent, why are you sending your kids to public school? Are they all going to give the same answer? No. They will say, typically, okay, why are you sending your kids to school? And they'll say, to get a good education. Right, to get educated, to learn, and then to get ready for college, to get them prepared for college so they can get a good job. They give that kind of answer. Now that's great, but that's the purpose of a school or public school. That's not the reason why maybe every single parent sends them. The purpose of a public school is that, hey, there's some bare minimum requirements in a capitalistic society that we want to put kids through an assembly line so they can churn out and become part of this capitalistic machine, right? That's the kind of basic reason for a public schooling system, right? In America, at least. Other countries, different. But America, it's pretty much just to help out corporations. That's kind of the idea, especially when you look at how the Rockefellers set up the modern public schooling industry. So somebody might give that answer, but that might not be their real reason. A parent might say, yeah, it's for them to get a good education and go to college and get a job. Maybe. Or maybe if you ask them and prod them, or somebody who's a bit more honest, they might say, I just need my kids out of the house. I just need them out of the house from this time so I can get stuff done, so I have time to myself. Sometimes people work from home. Like, I need them out of here. I don't have time. I don't have the patience for homeschooling or any of this other stuff. Private school's too expensive. So the real reason wasn't that public school's so great or this. It was some other reasons. So there's a difference between the purpose of a schooling system, meaning a public schooling system. It's a reason for why it was created. And then there's a reason for why I or a parent would have sent them there. And they don't always align. So what's the point over here? There's two different questions that we ask. One is, what is our purpose as insan? What did Allah make us for? What are we supposed to achieve? Now, Allah said, I made you for ma'rifah. That's different than saying, okay, but Allah, what was your actual intention? What was going on in quote unquote your mind? What were you thinking about? We can't say need, but there's got to be something within Allah that said, you know what, I've got to make insan. I have to make this creation. Those are two separate questions. Both of them, inshallah, in our next session, if Allah gives us tawfiq, we'll try to link those two, try to answer them, and see how they relate to this ayah of Quran of Allah saying that the reason I made you is to gain ma'rifah of me. Inshallah, we'll continue this in the coming weeks. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ahli baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.